All right, I think we'll get started. I just want to say hello to everyone. My name is Miljan Trulov. I'm the Vice President, Dean of Admission and Financial Aid. Really excited to have you here for our office hours. In just a second, our two faculty members are going to kick off this program. But before we started, I wanted to give you a heads up on how we're going to do questions. So at the bottom of your screen, you all have a chat function. You can privately chat me. You can find my name. I'm Miljan Trulov. You can privately chat me any questions that you have at any time during the presentation. And then when Chris and Kelly move into the question and answer segment, I will start sharing some of your questions. But instead of chatting those to everyone, chat them to me and I'll make sure that they get to both of our faculty members. But Chris and Kelly, I'll let you begin.
Great. Hi. I'm Chris Anderson. Welcome to these shared faculty office hours. I teach in the Department of Psychology.
Hi, I'm Kelly McConville. Welcome. So I teach in math and I'm a statistician.
So today we're going to tell you about our departments at Reid, share some information about our research, and give you some idea of what we appreciate about being at Reid. When we're done, we'll open up for questions. And as Miljan just said, please go ahead and chat your questions to him. He will go ahead and collect them and share them with us. So I'm going to get started. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by sharing some information about the curriculum in the psychology department, share with you some information about my research as one example in the department, and then pass it over to Kelly. So if you give me a second, I will get my slide shared here for you. All right, just give it a second. Here we go. So yeah, so I'm going to talk to you about our Department of Psychology and our curriculum. So we have 8 ongoing faculty members in the department. As you see here, we represent a lot of different areas in the field of psychology. I am the clinical psychologist in the department, and I will talk a little bit about my research in adolescent alcohol and drug use decision-making. I also do work in gender issues, specifically about with people who identify as women and health-related behavior. I have colleagues who cover the areas of psycholinguistics, developmental psychology, behavioral learning, behavioral neuroscience, learning, social psychology, cognitive neuroscience, and we have a new cognitive psychologist, Kevin Holmes, who will be joining us in the fall. My colleague, Kathy Olson, is actually going to be leaving the department and be the new dean of faculty, but we will have another social psychologist joining us. So in the psychology major, it's actually relatively light in terms of major requirements. There's 11 units that go into the psychology major. The first is our introductory psychology course, and that's really different than what you find pretty much anywhere in the country. In the first semester, students take our course called Foundations of Psychological Science. And in that, it's a fairly larger lecture portion of the course, where the students are then broken up to smaller groups of about 30 students, and then again into smaller groups at 16 to do laboratory-based learning. So really, in your very first semester, you're learning the techniques that psychologists use to conduct our science. We have lectures from all of the faculty members in the department, so you get a chance to learn about all the different specialty areas in psychology, learn about their research, and really find out which areas in psychology excite you the most. Then in our second semester, students sign up for 4 quarter, so that's half of the semester, laboratories. And of those 4 laboratories, you get to meet you get to pick of the 8 faculty in the department, which 4 were the most interesting to you in that first semester, and then do a laboratory intensive with them for 7 weeks. And in that time, you're actually designing studies, you're collecting data, you're learning how to analyze data that really gets you set for the next phase if you choose to major in psychology. After that, students go into what we call our core courses. You can see them here in pink or red. So as you see, there are the 8 different domains of psychology that are covered in the department. Students are required to take 4 core courses. Many people take those their sophomore and junior year, but you can certainly take them at any time after your freshman year. And those, again, are the specialty areas in the department where people really get a foundation and a much deeper understanding of that area than you may have been introduced to in introductory psychology.
Chris, can I pause you for just a moment?
Yeah,
If you adjust your slide view, I think we're only getting part of your slides.
let's
So if you
see.
select swap displays, it might give us,
Oh,
there we
I'm
go.
sorry. You guys have it. You have the other side. Sorry about that. Let
No
me
problem.
swap that. I couldn't see it because I was on full screen. Let's see.
I think if you select play from start,
Let's see. Go up here and swap displays. It's just a little slow.
there you go.
Oh, I see. It's on the other screen. I'm looking at my presenter view. There you go. How's that? Can you
Okay,
guys see
thank
better
you.
now? All right. So I'll go right to where I was before that. All right, so these, I just talked about the core courses. Then you have elective units. Really, electives are any specialty course that you want to take. And we have upper division courses. So let's say you really liked my course in psychopathology, which is the study of mental disorders. You could go ahead and take either my class in addictions or my class in clinical psychology, if those are interest to you. But all of us have upper division courses that follow those core courses. So if you really get turned on by a subject, you can take deeper study. Or maybe there's just an interesting course that's being offered in an area in psychology that just you're curious about, so you can take that. All of our students take a statistics course in the department, research design and data analysis, that prepares folks for both their qualifying exams and then their thesis. And as you hopefully know by now from Reid, all of our students do a year-long intensive research project in the psychology department. They pretty much all include doing independent research. So if you're doing human subjects research, you'd work with a psychologist who specializes in that area, go through institutional review board procedures, and then conduct your own study. Get the data, analyze it, and write it up. And our students really have been quite successful in our department. A good chunk of our students actually end up publishing portions of their thesis in academic journals, so, or present them at national conferences. So we're very, very proud of the work of our students. So outside of those core courses in psychology, students also do an allied field. So allied fields, as you can see here, can be a variety of different domains. There's 6 additional courses outside of psychology. Students take courses in arts and literature, biophysical and computational sciences. So could be doing a lot of things in Kelly's department, for example. We have cognitive science, so folks who are interested in kind of augmenting their understanding of how human thought and decision making. Cross-cultural studies for people who would like to bring in aspects of culture and do these psychological phenomena as we study them in other courses. Are they cross-culturally relevant? And also history and social sciences. So students who have more of an interest in sort of the anthropology, political science, those areas can integrate.
Statistics class. So those 2 classes in green, I would call theoretical stats classes. So those are helping us build up understanding where estimators come from. The 4 orange classes in the bottom, those would be our applied statistics classes. So we have an intro stats class, and then we have 2 200 level applied classes. So right now I'm teaching data science, which is really quite fun. I just finished office hours, and currently my students are analyzing Call of the Wild, which maybe some of you read, so they're doing some text analysis on that right now. Stat Learning is our other 200 level applied class, so both of those classes you could take after intro stats. So in Stat Learning, you're going to learn how to build strong predictive models. And then the other class I'm teaching right now is Stats Practicum. So that's the class at the end there. So you could take Stats Practicum if you've taken intro and then one of those 200 level classes. Practicum's a really fun class because the students do a semester-long project where they're answering some research question that was posed by a faculty member or a staff on campus. So this semester, we're doing some forestry, we're doing some looking at the impacts of vote at home, which seems particularly relevant nowadays. We're looking at an institutional research project, looking at the similarity of colleges. and we're counting crows. So Portland has this giant urban crow roost, and so we're building maps to look at the patterns there. So that is our stats program. As I said, I would tell you a little bit also about CS. I guess I should give you also some head counts in terms of faculty. So we have 2 statisticians and also a 3rd visiting statistician. We have 8 mathematicians, and then computer science has 3 computer scientists and two visitors. So I have now here on this slide the CS curriculum. So it does have some of the math courses in there, right? So still calculus, analysis, linear algebra, and discrete structures. But then also you see there's this CS1 and CS2 courses. So those are courses that then usually you would take in your 1st or 2nd year. And you absolutely can start the CS major, maybe not taking CS1 the 1st semester and still be successful. And then there are those other 3 required courses: algorithms, computability and complexity, and then systems. And this is a major that is very rich in electives. So you do take quite a few electives to finish out the major, which is a great way of, you know, sort of figuring out which niche of computer science you might be interested in. Okay, so that's our curriculum. So I'm gonna stop sharing now, and now just gonna talk a little bit about my research. So just to give you an example of some of the research we do in my department. So we are also a very active research department. So in the summer, I would say the department typically has around 20-ish students around doing research in math or statistics. I'll have 4 students this summer remotely or on campus, depending on the situation, who are in my forestry data science lab. So I'm a survey statistician, and so I like to work on problems where the data were collected under some complex sampling design. So we collected data on participants of some sort. So I work a lot, as I said, I'm going to do forestry data science this summer. So I work a lot with the Forest Service, which in that case, we then aren't sampling people, we're sampling trees. But I also work with the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and then we're sampling establishments or people. So I like working on problems where, okay, I've got a sample of trees or people, but I also have some big data. So with the Forest Service, that could be large scale photography. So really flying planes over land and taking pictures. It can be remotely sensed data. And so how can I combine that large scale photography with data we collected on the ground to come up with better estimates of our forest attributes? So in particular, I'm working with some students right now on counting trees in Alaska, because it turns out we don't know how many trees there are in Alaska, but there are many. And so we are using ground data, and also, so they're flying planes over the ground data, and they're sending down what's called LIDAR, which figures out the height of the canopy. So we're taking the height of the canopy and combining it with the counts to come up with a better estimate of how many trees we have in Alaska. So yeah, so I usually have a group of students working with me on various forestry related projects during the summer. And as I said, I also work with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I also work with other statisticians. I'm also particularly interested in undergraduate research in statistics. So I study undergraduate research. So I do research on undergraduate research in statistics to see what benefits and barriers people have had to participation there. So yeah, that's just one example, but there's lots of flavors of research going on in my department. So the other statistician, Andrew, he looks at taking statistical tests and trying to make them private so that we can use statistical tests even on sensitive data. And then we have lots of mathematicians doing cool, interesting work too. All right, so I will stop there and can move on to, I think, questions.
Yes. Well, let me put on my chat and make sure I can see the questions that are come up.
So I have a question. And just a reminder to folks, go ahead and send me your questions. Now is a great time, but I have one that I'd like to throw to you right away. We have a student who wants to know if they would need to major in neuroscience to discuss brain structure or to use brain imaging technology in their thesis, or could they do that simply as a psychology major?
Yeah, that's a great question. So no, in fact, I often encourage my students to do neuroscience through psychology. So there's 3 different pathways that you can do neuroscience at Reid. One is this neuroscience major, but the neuroscience major has a lot of requirements, and they kind of are dealing with 2 masters in biology and psychology. We have biology students who are much more interested at cellular level and work with non-human animals in looking at neuroscience from that perspective. In psychology, we have lots of students who are neuroscience students and go on to neuroscience graduate programs who study psychology. So if you remember, there was that allied field in bio and computational sciences. So many of our in-house neuroscience students, that's where they take a lot of biochem, other courses that would feed in. We also have students who do neuroscience who may do the cognitive science. So you have to understand that there's a lot of different ways to do neuroscience. I actually have 2 neuroscience students among my thesis students right now. One is from the traditional neuroscience program, and one is from the psychology version. In both cases, one, we were using cortisol assays with humans, and the other person was actually looking at ketamine as a treatment for substance use disorders and did a special meta-analytic systematic review process, which Kelly knows very well, meta-analysis through statistics. So it's a different data source because obviously we're not going to have a clinic where we're giving ketamine to people who are in recovery from substance use disorders. So there's a lot of different ways to do that program.
I have another question. So how often are faculty from 2 different departments, how often do they have an opportunity to work together? How often does that actually happen?
I don't know if Kelly wants to speak to that. I can answer that too.
Yeah, so I guess I'll hop in and say it's pretty easy for statisticians. I'd say I get asked to participate on things quite a bit since stats is just inherently interdisciplinary, right? It's not fun until we have data, and the data usually comes from someone else. So just as, I guess, an example, I'm co-advising one of my students who's working on a forestry project with a computer scientist right now, and we're building a deep learning model that absolutely is useful having a computer scientist on that project. We also have several interdisciplinary majors. So 2 of my thesis students are math and econ interdisciplinary majors. And so again, I get to collaborate with econ professors on that also.
And I would say in psychology, you know, actually after hearing Kelly talk, I have a project with some nasty nested data solution problems. So I may be calling her very shortly after this meeting. But we have a student right now, in fact, who is doing a thesis in human-computer interface and using brain neurosignaling to ask a computer to do certain tasks. And so this student has been my academic advisee for years, and he's collaborating with someone in computer science. So I think we do work cross-disciplinarily quite often. We've had in my department faculty working together between psychology and political science, between psychology and linguistics. I think it really depends on the nature of the work we do, but we're very open to that. And I see that we have a question asking about what is it like, how is teaching at Reid different from teaching at other colleges? So I can start and then let Kelly add to that if that's okay. So I've taught many different institutions. I taught at large research one institutions. I was actually at a medical school teaching medical students before I came to Reid, in addition to teaching undergraduates. So I think the thing that really my students tell me, those who come to Reid and then go to large research institutions for their graduate work, is how much hands-on time you get with faculty. Even in this kind of unusual time that we're living with, I spent hours with my students over spring break even. My thesis students were wrapping up data collections and doing analysis, and I could sit with a student for 2 hours running analyses. You know, I have laboratory meetings every week where I have all of my students, my undergraduate research assistants. Sometimes I've had postdocs and other people working with me as well as my thesis students. And we have that time together. So I think teaching at Reid is really a hands-on experience. Our classes, you know, aside from some of these, our introductory science lecture portions that are large, but even in there, I'm in small groups with students. I know my students' names. I know things about them. Even in this kind of unusual time, you know, students have emailed me or texted me and say, hey, can we chat? And I get a Zoom open so we can talk. So I think, one, it's the personal connection with students. I think it's also, I find teaching at Reid much more like when I was teaching graduate students. I think the level of intellectual engagement of students is much on par with that kind of passion for learning that I see in graduate students. Obviously, we're not treating you like graduate students because you're learning a lot of the basics, and we don't expect you to be graduate students, but I would say that passion for learning and the engagement is much more akin to my work with graduate students or medical trainees. So Kelly, I don't know if you want to say anything.
Yeah, I'll just quickly hop in. I think Chris's answer was absolutely spot on. So I've taught at a couple of liberal arts colleges though also. So I taught at Whitman College and Swarthmore College also. So I can speak a little bit to the difference I've felt at teaching at these schools, though, you know, I'm a statistician. I'm going to say it's a sample size of 3. So I'm going to make broad generalizations even if I shouldn't. But, you know, Reid, we don't have, I would say, as many of a lot of the extracurricular activities that I think sometimes we're pulling my students away from their academics. So that would be a big thing I noticed coming to Reid from those other institutions. I would also say the senior thesis is a really unique, wonderful aspect of the Reid education, right? So you might not realize it now, but this idea of getting to work for a year with a faculty member on a project is really quite wonderful. And I mean, the mentoring that goes on and the relationship you develop and how you grow and learn and become a better researcher is a really great part of the Reid experience. So to me, those are 2 things that I found are unique to Reid, especially among liberal arts colleges.
I will say, you know, just to jump on part of Kelly's point, it's not that, I would say that our students do have a lot of extracurricular opportunities. It's just they're not going to be the traditional big football team, you know, big sporting events, those sort of things, because we're different. It's not that, hey, we got an awesome soccer team. Our women's rugby team has done incredibly well. So I'm not dissing our athletic program, but I will say I think the type of extracurriculars are different, and how people engage with them may be different, I think, than other institutions. I actually had a student this year who had never done mock trial, got into mock trial and had a wonderful experience. I have students who, actually, I would say one thing at Reid that I find is a nice bridge between extracurricular work and what we do in the classroom is we have an amazing program called Seeds, where students are able to engage in the community. So I have my clinical psychology course. In fact, my students are required to do human services fieldwork in the community. Our Seeds department has a large group of community engagement activities where they can match students with professional opportunities, volunteer opportunities, activism activities in the community. And one wonderful thing that's relatively new is that students on work study have the opportunity actually to use some of their financial support through work study to work in their passion in the community. So I would just say that I think students have a lot of different areas that they have interest. It just may not be those that are consistent with other small liberal arts colleges or big universities.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Okay, so it looks like we have another question. How does the CS Math interdisciplinary major differ from the CS major? And what does the CS Math major look like specifically? So I will say that they're pretty similar to each other. So I think it's like 1 or 2 classes more in math you would take if you're going to do the Math CS interdisciplinary major versus if you're just doing the CS major. So they are fairly similar to each other. So actually the advice I would have for you if you're interested in that is really you would come and you would take CS and you would take math, and you would do both of those concurrently and then decide, if you're more interested in one or the other, or if you really want to do both. I think something that makes them different is if you do the math CS interdisciplinary major, you will have an advisor in math and an advisor in CS. And so for your senior thesis, and so you really will have to do a thesis that spans both those fields, that has definitely math and definitely CS in it. Whereas if you did the CS major, we wouldn't have that additional sort of math component to your thesis. But the courses you'll take would be almost identical, just slightly more math for the math CS.
Chris and Kelly, I have a question that maybe both of you can answer. I'm combining two of our questions. There's a question about how many courses a student has to take before moving into research. And then if you could give a few examples of the type of research and types of internships, maybe one or two each that a student might take on.
Yeah, so I'll say, if I think about my research lab last summer, I had one student who had just finished their first year and two students who had just finished their sophomore year, and then two students who had just finished their junior year. So I would say in stats, we really do run the range of when students get started on research. And we meet them where they are, and I have lots of different projects going at once, so we sort of find the projects that are suitable for them. So it is possible in math and stats to get started pretty early if you know that's something you want to do. In terms of internships, if I have students who are interested in internships, I definitely send them to the Center for Life Beyond Reid. They're a really great resource in terms of internships, but to give you an idea of in terms of research, another kind of neat thing that in statistics that I've sent students to and they seem to really enjoy is there's this summer institute in biostatistics. So we don't have any biostats faculty on campus, but we do have a lot of students who are interested in medical statistics. And so across the country, there are, I think it's about 5 different campuses that will run a summer program on biostatistics, so within a biostats department in a big school. And so the students are usually doing some summer-long project related to that, but also just learning the basics of epidemiology, clinical trials, that sort of thing. So that's a neat project that also is one that I've had students pretty successfully get into. So I had a student last summer get in after their first year, and then I had a student get in this summer who I guess is a junior.
I had myself muted. Okay. So in psychology, as I said, your second semester of your first year, you're already conducting research in class. So, I mean, that you're kind of immediately doing that work. Some students find their passion right away in introductory psychology, that foundations class, that first semester, and may ask to volunteer during their second semester. For me, in my laboratory, I actually don't take students until their summer after their first year, because I really want my students to learn how to be college students. I want them to make friends and, go on great fun trips to the ski cabin or to go to shows. I kind of want that first year for people to really kind of establish a social network and kind of explore all the exciting things that we have. But the summer after your first year, I often have students work with me, and I've had a variety. I mean, some summers I have a small lab with 2 people. Sometimes I have 8. It really depends if I have a grant going on or what projects are going on. When I'm grant funded, I've had students working in schools with me, doing data collections with high school students. I have some students who are working on lab-based projects. I kind of try to match students' interest to what projects I have. So summer programs can come through opportunities. The psychology department has summer fellowship programs that are competitive within the department. We have the Wender Fellowship and the John Leonard Adams Fellowship, which are summer funds for students to conduct collaborative research with faculty. We also have the research experience for undergraduates, or we have equivalent to that here at Reid, where students can propose their own study and they get grants to conduct that research with Reid funds. And so it's kind of your own research that you get to do and funded by the college. I should just also give a plug that the college does have funds for students to attend conferences to present any research that they actually have conducted themselves. So prior to this, a student and I were going to go to New Orleans and present her research at an international alcohol conference. So those are fellowship opportunities. And then we also have very good relationships if students are have done things in our labs and want to branch out or have a specialty that's outside of our arena of expertise. We have very close relationships with Oregon Health Sciences University, which is the medical school across the river, where students can conduct research there. Also the VA hospital and Children's Hospital, especially those who may be really interested in neuroimaging techniques. We don't have a fMRI here. I have close colleagues who my students work with on the Hill to get fMRI experience or other things that we may not have. So there's also obviously competitive programs, as Kelly was talking about, nationally. So our students go to REUs at other institutions. We have a number of students who've gotten NIH, National Institute of Health, summer fellowships, as well as post baccalaureate fellowships with them. So there's a question that came in. So someone was asking, if you're creating a hypothesis for social or drug use behaviors with humans, how often do you have to test that hypothesis on animals until we can apply it to humans? I think typically what we see is that folks, there's folks who are really attracted to using non-human animal models for addictive behaviors or social relationships. And then we have students who are much more interested in doing starting with the human paradigm. So I think what we do with students is also allow their interest to guide them. So students who are much more interested in basic processes research or want to do drug administrations, because we do have students who are administering cocaine or various other agents, alcohol to rodent models. Obviously, we're not going to do drug or alcohol administrations with humans in our setting, so they would go to more of an animal model. Those folks who wanted to look at decision making or cognition around those behaviors, they would go to a human model. So there's no requirement that you start in one to the other. But I have students whose interest is translational. So I've had students who work both with Paul Curry in behavioral neuroscience doing animal models and with me looking at addictive behaviors in basic processes and then more at the level of human cognition and then intervention work. So you can do both, but you don't have to do both if you don't want to.
Great, so we got another question that came in. What do class sizes look like both for intro and advanced math classes? Okay, so at the intro level, we cap our classes at 24. I will say though that in stats, we also have a lab component associated with our intro stats class, where the students practice using a statistical software package called R. For those labs are capped at 16. So I think of the labs as a really nice way to get to know my students on a much more one-on-one basis. For our upper level classes, it really can depend. I think it sort of ranges from somewhere between 10 to 24. I would say that the average is probably somewhere, at least for stats, is somewhere around 18. So yeah, I think that's about the sizes. Again, I think we get to have a lot of communication back and forth, small group work in the classes because of those sizes.
Yeah, and I don't know if we just to give a little information on psychology, but so our introductory Foundations of Psychological Science class, the lecture is 96 students, and then students are broken into groups of 32 and then 16. So it's akin to what Kelly's talking about is, when we get to 16, that's where we're doing the hands-on work. We don't use R extensively in psychology. We use Stata, but I think we're moving to R slowly across time. In our other courses, they're all capped at 24. Some of the neuroscience courses have a lower cap because of bench workspace. If you're doing surgeries, it's very hard for a faculty member to teach you unless it's, more like 12 or 14. So it varies, but typically at Reid classes are no larger than 24.
So another question was, what kind of interaction do the math and philosophy departments have? So I don't know of any current collaborations. There may be some that I just don't know about, but we definitely have students who are interested in both. I have an advisee right now who's going that path of taking a philosophy class and a math class at the same time, you know, each semester taking one of each, to sort of try to decide whether they're more interested in math or philosophy in terms of majoring. I know we graduated a student last year who did double major, had a major in math and a major in philosophy. So we definitely have a group of students with those interests. I actually think right now we have a senior who's doing an ad hoc interdisciplinary major of math and philosophy. So looking at the philosophy of math. So there's definitely interest among the students.
Excellent. Thank you both, Kelly and Chris. I think that was our last question. I'll give you both the final word before we close out the session.
So Kelly, why don't you go first?
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. You know, I'm very excited. You've got a big decision ahead of you. You're going to make the right decision, whatever it is, but I hope we gave you some useful information today.
Yeah, and I just want to pass on my thanks. It's you know, obviously we would love to meet you in person right now, but you know, we're all in a different situation, but I hope you are finding ways to thrive. I think we are too. And I would say kind of one of the best parts of this experience for me is kind of the close relationships I have with my students, both students now and students from the past who are still in touch with me. So I wish you the best of luck as you're looking at different schools, and I hope you'll come play with us. We have a lot of fun.
Thank you both. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.